One of the things that's very interesting with botnets is you can very clearly see how they are evolving to take over an entire ecosystem. It's very difficult to block botnet spam because it's coming at you from all over with different and modified subjects. From the same paper, this is on the effectiveness on blocking this and how quickly it was that, by several days out, their blocking was almost ineffective. The first line shows how quickly the effectiveness of a blacklist drops with time, with it week-old blacklisting blocking only 20% of the spam. Using the relay IPs from the previous day blocks around 40% of the spam, and using the entire week's relay IPs can decrease the volume of spam by 50 to 60%. Finally, we see the commercial blacklist performs roughly as well as the local blacklist, which uses a week's worth of information. We view these as preliminary results since a rigorous evaluation on the effectiveness is possible only if we can also quantify the false positive rates. So spam decays very quickly, and particularly when dealing with botnets, the location as a source is going to change from day to day to day. And it's one of the reasons that so many spam products are give rise to increasing automation. Because if you have to even have a human look at something and evaluate it before blocking it, that decreases your time to blocking things, and that time is very critical. Now, Snowshoe Spam is a means of sending a little bit of very bad mail across lots of IPs with good traffic. You might see these folks try and take advantage of some giant mail stream like Gmail, or to take advantage of otherwise mostly good senders, like many of those of us who are here in the community. Spamhaus created a list to try to block Snowshoe Spam, the CSS list, in October 2009, but it's still very difficult to do because it can be hard to want to block an otherwise quality source of mail if there's just a little bit of bad stuff. And similarly, for the folks who administrate those servers, if they're intentionally sending only good mail and they've got maybe a rogue customer, it can be very hard for them to determine who those customers are based on their own means of filtering because of some of these other filtering challenges. Authentication is an old problem. There's an RFC from 1974 that proposed a way of dealing with email authentication, though it didn't really go anywhere at the time. But in the mid-2000s, we got sender ID and SPF, and domain keys and DKIM, where it was yet another means of trying to deal with forged headers and botnets, just to imply that if I claim that this is the domain that I'm sending you mail under, that yes, I really am this domain, because it's tied to the ownership of the domain itself. It can still be exploited, but it's just that much harder to do so. Now let's move on to closer to today. In the 2010s, we get DMARC. We also get the Adobe gang of criminals, the attack on Spamhaus, CASL, heavy use of redirects and URL shorteners. Most of you here are probably familiar with this stuff, so I'm not going to get too far into these bullet points. But I should mention CASL, the development of CASL. This image of the angry man in the CRTC did not put that together. I found that through a Google image search. So there's definitely some frustration with the CRTC. But what happened was Canada did not have a spam law for a very long time, unlike the United States. And they wanted a spam law, but they were not terribly fond of the one that we had here for good reason. And so they put together the Task Force on Spam, which included some folks from our conference here, including Neil Schwartzman, as well as representatives from government and industry, where they were going to study the spam problem and come up with recommendations to the government about how to put together a law that was supposed to be fair to everybody. It was based on the Canadian privacy law, PIPEDA, and it was really intended to try to patch some of what they saw as problems with CAN spam. So you'll see it took them a very long time. The task force started in the mid-2000s. CASL was passed in 2010, and the final regulations were put into force in 2014. So CASL went into force July 1st, 2014, last year. So one of the challenges of working with spam on a legislative side is how slow the law moves compared to what we just saw, where spam itself is changing on a daily basis. Now, because of these various abilities to evade traditional blocking, you start to see link reputation and blocking, where organizations are collecting reputation based on good and bad mail as attached to not just the domain it says it's from, especially because without authentication that's very easy to fake, but also all of those links in the message. So beyond the image spammers, pretty much every other spammer needs a link in their message. They want you to click on something. And that's a very good means of trying to figure out, are these people legitimate or not? However, spammers can constantly obtain new domains for spamming. Now, in turn, for those on the sender side, you may see reduced performance with using a new domain. So if you're at an established sending organization and you continue to get a new domain and start sending, then you are likely to face some challenges in the first few days. In turn, we also see some big issues with domain reputation consolidation and issues within redirects. So it's very easy to exploit redirecting systems. Now, some websites will have open redirect scripts where the web developer is using these redirects for whatever marketing program and did not close them down to only links on their own domain. And so spammers find those and take advantage of them. And they'll also use things like bit.ly and TCO to shorten links. Now, many filtering systems will start to look one or two down the line, but they found in turn that the spammers will start chaining these together. So now my short link will go to bit.ly, go to TCO, go to Owly, back to bit.ly, and so on and so forth down the chain, and that becomes very difficult. So in turn, some of the organizations with those shortened links also have reputational issues, and it can be very difficult to deliver mail using shortened links at all. In fact, some of them have tried to have conversations with us here at MOG, and my understanding is that that is still an ongoing challenge. I believe we've been working on a document for a while on best practices regarding link shortening. A story that I found recently that really just kind of hurts the brain is the open redirects on .gov sites here in the US. So one.usa.gov was a bit.ly collaboration with usa.gov, where we wanted to have shortened links for the government. Great, that's awesome. But they had open redirects on a lot of those .gov websites. And so the spammers realized that and made other bit.ly links that they could then use a .gov link for. And of course, very few people are really filtering out .gov because it's not thought to be terribly exploited. So that was pretty painful. There was one where it basically went through one.usa.gov to labor.vermont.gov/linkclick.asp with a question mark equals, and that'll put you over to that open redirect to workforprofit.net and give you a work from home scam. Awesome. So ultimately, spam is evolving in response to filtering. There was a 2010 paper called Exploring the Spam Arms Race to Characterize Spam Evolution. And what it did was it had a 10-year-old corpus of spam, and it ran spam through the Spam Assassin rule sets that came out through the major releases of each year during that time. And they found that, for example, version 3.2.0 of Spam Assassin, their rules caught 65% of the spam from the year immediately prior to its release. But it caught less than 30% of the spam generated the year following its release. So you can see that the spammers are getting caught, they get the rule set, they shift in response to those rules, and less and less and less of that spam is caught as time goes on. But at the same time, even while old versions become increasingly ineffective, it's still catching 30% of spam that should easily be filtered from the year before. So while some spammers are evolving, old spam techniques never die out. And that is particularly salient to why the rule sets are so complicated today. Do we see that much image spam in the wild? No. Can you send a message that's just an image? Probably not so much. Do we see that much in terms of just basic header forging? Probably a lot less, because it's very easy to detect, but it's still out there. So you can't take these things out of your rules. And for those who are sending as third-party senders, you've got to be very careful about authentication, because failing your authentication means you're still getting caught in the rules on the years after years that we've had to do this. So I told you we'd catch back up with Bamford. Where is Bamford today? Well, as I mentioned, he had a very well-publicized retirement in 1998, and he opened a nightclub in New Hampshire called Plum Crazy. Yes, with Pickle Jar, and they went bankrupt. Then he moved to Las Vegas, where he DJ'd at a hip-hop club under the name DJ Masterweb. And that didn't actually pay very much. And it turns out that he has rather a large gambling problem. And Las Vegas is a great place to do that when you don't make very much money. And so he got back into the spamming business. He created what he called SmartBot. And it was a piece of malware that sold a malware cleanup tool. So pretty direct. We'll infect you and then sell you the tool to clean it up. That didn't work out so well for him either. So, he got in trouble from the FTC. So then he got really into social media scams. He started offering Easter cards to MySpace users who provided their username and password to a lookalike login page. Once he had login information, he then logged into their account and sent links to all of their friends to various sites selling ringtones and porn and get-your-rich schemes. Then MySpace sued him, and he moved on to Facebook. Now, he claims to be quite disorganized with money, and in the course of these lawsuits, there's some pretty amazing testimony where they're asking him where all of the money has gone, because one of the things that the FTC likes to do when it prosecutes people is take away all of their profits. And so they're wondering where his $4 million went, and he claims to have no idea, and appears genuinely not to have realized where any of that money went. He said, at least $3 million of that was gambling debts, but I don't know about where the rest of it went and exactly where. So at this point, he just started ignoring his judgments, where he would get repeated judgments against him, and just stopped showing up to court. And in turn, they really did not like that and gave him a criminal contempt prosecution in 2011. So he's filed for personal bankruptcy a number of times, but has failed to file the proper paperwork, and so his bankruptcy has been declared void. So at this point, he's still facing these criminal contempt charges and owes nearly $1 billion in fines. So the case is ongoing today, but I would expect to see at any time over the next couple of years, Spamford Wallace is likely to go to jail, largely for just not showing up to court above and beyond all the rest of this. Every action causes a reaction. Spammers find a way around every block. Anti-spammers find a way to block the new techniques. Escalation, lather, rinse, and repeat. I've been online for a long time, but I've only been a direct part of the spam fight for the last 5 years. I didn't build it, and I don't feature in these stories. But I encourage everyone who was around during that time to share their spam fighting camp stories with the rest of us. We honor those of you who went before us. And if you think that I've missed anything significant, come tell me your stories. I'd love to hear them. And you would be welcome to join us at the Message Systems cocktail reception tonight. And with that, I'll take any questions. Thank you. Any questions? Yes?
What do you know about ransomware? It's gotten a lot of press, general press, has been reported on some of the news outlets. What do you know about this originating in?
That's a good question. So to repeat, the question is, what do I know about ransomware? And the answer, to be honest, is not a whole lot. My understanding is that ransomware is less the traditional spammer gang and is more some individual hackers, people who were interested in making the name for themselves with things like celebrity nude photos. But I don't know as much about that, and I would invite you to do some research and let's find out together. All right, well, I will thank you all for your time, and we do have some forms if you would like to evaluate me, or if you've already done so. If you need to sign in and didn't, please come back up here and sign in, and thank you very much.